The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Chen Wei stepped onto the crystalline speaking platform. 300 cycles had passed since humanity's first contact with the galaxy's dominant species, and the memory of their initial dismissal still burned in the minds of every human present. Weak explorers, the Vorthak Prime Minister had called them during that first historic session. The reptilian being's forked tongue had flickered with amusement as he gestured dismissively at the small human delegation. Your kind barely managed to crawl from one star system to another. You have no great fleets, no conquered territories, no subjugated species. What could such limited beings possibly offer this council? The assembled representatives from dozens of species had chittered, roared, and harmonized their agreement. The mighty Krex Empire controlled 47 star systems through brute force. The technologically advanced ethereal collective had bent reality itself to their will, phasing through dimensions to claim resources. The parasitic hive swarm had consumed entire worlds, adding their biomass to an ever-growing swarm. But humans had arrived in a single battered exploration vessel with a crew of 12. They spoke of cooperation, of shared knowledge, of peaceful coexistence. The council had laughed. Now, 3 centuries later, Chen Wei smiled as she surveyed the same chamber. Many familiar faces were gone, replaced by younger representatives who had grown up in a galaxy fundamentally changed by human presence. Honorable delegates, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrices. When we first stood before this council, we were indeed few in number. We had explored barely beyond our own stellar neighborhood. We possessed no great weapons, commanded no armies, ruled no empires. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled beings. But what we lacked in strength, we compensated for with something your species had forgotten: curiosity without conquest. In the observation galleries, she could see them, beings from worlds that hadn't existed as sovereign entities 300 cycles ago. The meditation masters of Kepler 442b, who had developed philosophical frameworks that ended the Krex's 5,000-year civil war. The bioengineers of Proxima Station, former hive-sworn drones who had broken free using human-taught concepts of individual identity. Representatives from the 43 worlds of the former Vorthak territories, now thriving independent colonies sharing advanced terraforming technologies. You called us weak explorers, Chen continued, her voice growing stronger. But while you conquered through force, we explored through partnership. Where you saw resources to exploit, we saw civilizations to understand. Where you built walls, we built bridges. The current Krex representative, a slender, peace-marked individual whose species had evolved beyond their warrior ancestors, stood and spoke in the harmonic language humans had helped preserve during the Great Reconciliation. The human speaks truth. My people learned that strength without wisdom leads only to destruction. Humanity taught us that exploration of ideas conquers more territory than exploration by sword. From across the chamber, a crystalline being that shimmered with internal light projected its thoughts directly into the translation matrix. It was one of the ascended, former ethereal collective members who had transcended their dimensional manipulation obsession to explore consciousness itself, guided by human philosophical traditions. The humans showed us that bending reality to one's will is inferior to understanding reality as it truly is. Through their guidance, we discovered that the greatest conquest happened not in physical space, but in the realm of comprehension. Chen nodded respectfully to both speakers before continuing her address. 300 cycles ago, this chamber contained representatives of 12 species, each suspicious of the others, each guarding their territories jealously. Today, we have delegates from over 3,000 distinct civilizations, all sharing in the greatest exploration project the galaxy has ever known. Behind her, the massive display screen activated, showing the current state of the galaxy. Gone were the harsh boundary lines that had once divided species into competing empires. Instead, a complex network of connection points sparkled across star systems: trade routes, cultural exchange programs, joint research stations, and collaborative terraforming projects. The Andromeda expedition launches next cycle, Chen announced. 17,000 volunteers from 400 species, using technologies developed through unprecedented cooperation. Ships built with Krex metallurgy and ethereal phase-shifting capabilities, powered by fusion cores perfected through human-Vorthak partnership, crewed by beings who see themselves not as conquerors, but as ambassadors to whatever we might find in distant galaxies. The chamber erupted in a symphony of approval, roars, chimes, harmonic resonances, and bioluminescent displays from species whose very existence had once been threatened by their neighbors. Chen raised her hand for silence, and the assembly quieted instantly, not from fear but from respect. "You were right about one thing," she said, her voice now soft but carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "Humans were weak explorers when we first arrived. We had no conquered territories, no enslaved populations, no hoarded resources." She smiled, and in that expression lay the quiet confidence of a species that had achieved something far greater than empire. "But we returned with something far more valuable than conquered stars. We returned with willing allies, with friends, with family we found among the cosmos. We conquered not through force but through understanding. We claimed not territory but hearts and minds." The ambassador gestured toward the viewing ports where the lights of 1,000 peaceful civilizations twinkled against the darkness. "You called us weak explorers, but we explored the one frontier that truly mattered, the infinite potential for different species to become something greater together than any of us could be alone." As the session ended and delegates began to mingle in the traditional post-assembly gatherings, Chen reflected on humanity's journey. They had indeed been weak when they first ventured into the galaxy, but in that weakness lay their greatest strength, the humility to learn, the courage to remain vulnerable, and the wisdom to understand that true conquest meant not claiming stars, but sharing them. In the end, they hadn't conquered the galaxy at all. They had taught it to conquer itself. Fear, hatred, isolation, and the terrible loneliness of beings convinced they stood alone against an hostile universe. That Chen knew was a victory worth celebrating across all the stars they had never needed to claim.